this is incredible. We- amidst all the voices that are on the internet, this is just incredible. This probably it kind of highlights just how incredible um, and, and disjointed everything is. I mean, I assume that's the real Hillary Clinton. Who knows these days? Is that the same person? Doesn't doesn't really look Hillary-ish. I don't know. But Steve goes back to tremendous history with Tony Campolo and his wife, and it's had a lot to do with them. And this this sort of exemplifies the Mark Quartile, who up till now in our disjointed body of Christ has had one kind of life, and they have to operate as God has made them, and Tony Campolo also, and they have pioneered certain things which were necessary for the stage that they've been living in. I guess, but it's like I don't know. I always sort of have the image of someone standing on the tail of a mouse and and telling the mouse it can run free or something like that. It's the idea of sitting Hillary Clinton down with Tony Campolo's wife and Steve Chalk being involved is so hilarious. It is that mouse picture. It really is just incredible. The Clintons are some of the major reason why everything just doesn't work. They're really up there with the reason why this world is just coming to a full stop. It's just incredible that Steve's having this talk. But this is the reality in which we live in. There's this surface exoteric reality which seems to make sense at some point, and then there's the esoteric reality underneath where it makes no sense at all. As the owner of Evergreen Shipping, and like Pelosi's husband owns a similar shipping system for child trafficking. It's staggering. It's just I mean, you don't know where to start, do you? Just don't know where to start. I was just tuning once, right? I was just tuning once, and I thought I'd send a thing through to Steve Chalk about UNICEF. And I honestly, I didn't have any information, but a lot of this stuff just comes while I'm tuning. And I told Steve that, did he realise what UNICEF really was? And the sort of people he was involved with? Anyway, he probably nothing to do with what I said, but he pulled away from that kind of stuff, and then he started his own church in London or something. I don't really know a lot about how Steve operates, but I did from our generation, because I'm a bit younger than Steve. I think I am. Yeah. We'd all observed and be so excited in our naive, charismatic way when Steve announced he was going to be working for BBC, but he was working as a trained poodle. There's no way he could even utter. He was an evangelist. There's no way he could operate as an evangelist. And they closed him in a little cage called Eco Development. And so his role in the BBC was all about behaving like a poodle for the new, now seconded subject of the Greenpeace sort of areas of concern from the 60s that are now been totally seconded by the Bilderberg group. It was like Steve Chalk was chosen as the wunderkind from the Christian world to front. And it's just amazing. And that's how we've all had rings run round us. I would have been just the same if I was a public figure. But I was lucky because I was 10 years behind. So I had a bit of space to examine what was going on a bit more. But yeah, it's incredible. How about this one? So this is totally different. This also is a Mark type post, right? So Marks hate penal substitution, and they hate. Their primary thing is about the fact that, you know, Jesus is all about defending the weak, and Steve Chalk is like that. All Marks are about defending the weak and doing this. But as we see in the last picture, they sit at a table with child traffickers. They're not in the real world. They're clueless. Clueless. Penal substitution, is it not interesting? I didn't know that it came out really in the 16th? Did you say 16th century or something? Didn't enter the scene until the 16th century. Now, why would it have entered the scene in the 16th century? Well, the Catholics had wrecked the gospel, and as taught in schools, had become the laughing stock of the whole world with selling indulgences, which Lord Sumption, one of his last books, was on the Albigensians and the whole story behind that. And he, I'm sure, is writing as a Catholic. So it's quite an interesting book, but several people have written the Albigensian history, but that generally gets taught anyway in universities that that was the turning point, really. Catholics could go no lower and still be considered Christian. And so something had to change, and they had so locked society. The thing I became aware of was that, like, the stonemasons couldn't even go from cathedral to cathedral, you know, in another city or another country, without the permission of a blooming authority, maybe even the Pope himself. Except he couldn't have spent all his days signing permissions for every little stonemason. But they had to receive permission not to go off and do anything else, even to go from city to city building a cathedral. That's how ridiculous the Catholic world was. Or am I just a product of limited education through universities? You know, is that just a thing to get everyone all worked up about Catholics? Or particularly in Protestant countries. So Martin Luther really brought in the re-establishing of what the gospel is. But about the 16th century, if penal substitution was coming in, it wasn't coming in as, well, maybe it was used later to be a Gothic terror tool. But the whole point is the very opposite. That's the very opposite. That's the side of the gospel that Marx seemed unable to get hold of. They operate very, very freely within the Romans 3-5 part, but they just can't get hold of the total victory of the gospel. And it's something to do, I've realised over the last few months, it is the way they are hardwired and the way they are made. I do not know Ryan Harbridge, but he is writing like a Mark Quartile person. Dave Lager, who moves in power, he's been killed several times, I think even by his own family. And Jesus has kept sending him back so he can instruct others in the power gospel. But can he get his head round real life? Can he get his head round the second side of the gospel, second deliverance at the cross? I don't think so. I don't think Ryan can. It's the good news of the second part of the gospel. And it was, all that side of things from baptism onwards, with adult baptism, is what was coming out during that period. And then in the actual 1600s themselves, which that's the 17th century, isn't it? You had Madame Guyon, always Madame Guyon before. Anyway, Madame Guyon and Jacob Boehmer in Germany were pioneers of the third level of the gospel in 1 John 2. Madame Guyon was burned by Catholics. So Satan, within the Marks, within the rest of the culture, are very dangerous people. They start killing you, ostracizing you, chucking you out, of which I'm also a product. Because the second half of the gospel actually gets to the root that Marx will never touch. They won't go down there. They're frightened. They will not go down to the Genesis 3 platform. They're scared stiff. It's a loss of control or something. It's a loss of control for all of us. We all hate it. But for some reason, the Marks are absolutely terrified. So it's something to do. It's related in some way. And I guess Steve Chalk is the same. It's somehow related to the cherub face. Okay, so it's all legitimate. It's how they're designed. Cherub face only appears in one of the three lists, and I mentioned that earlier. One of the three lists of the four living faces, living beings. We all have all four faces, but we have a primary face. Well, me, I seem to be like much of Myers-Briggs. I'm kind of a split of Luke's and John's, I think. However it works. Canon Andrew White seems a split between, well, anyone who has international standing seems to have a fair old smattering of all the component parts. But as I've often said with Canon Andrew White, how do you get a Matthew quality next to a Mark quality in the one body? Must be a nightmare. Because Marks have a much more humble feel and a serving other feel, and Matthews have this presiding lion-like face. But Marks are made, in one of the lists, it describes them as cherub face. And for them, things are very simple. I was writing about that this morning. Someone reducing everything to love. They reduce everything to love. And there's a side to that that's true. Actually, deep down in the spirit, we're either moving from self for others or self for self. There's only two masters, and we have to be working and serving for one. You cannot serve God and Mammon. So in that sense, there's a deep spiritual truth about it. But somehow in their soul wiring, it's very difficult for them to split things further. They're very hardwired to action, and there's no splitting down in a Mark. but it has the tremendous limitation, that's the word I was trying to look for. It has the limitation when they start instructing the other quartiles, because they're instructing out of their wiring that isn't relevant for the other three quartiles. Because I don't think the other three quartiles are wired so simply. So you don't take theology from a mark. You leave them to their own. That's how they make life work, and that's fine for them. It doesn't work for the other three quartiles. So the penal substitution emerging at that point must be the stage where the Christians started to get into the early progression from the first deliverance at the cross to the second deliverance at the cross. And for somehow, Marx perceived this second message as something that means Gothic horror. Well, it is Gothic horror to the flesh. But it's a full release, which means that Genesis 3 no longer works. Because that man died. Doesn't seem to be part of their gospel. Doesn't seem to be something that Marx can get hold of. So rather than getting hold of it, they say, well, all right, scrap the whole of the second half of the gospel. Scrap the third level message altogether. Everybody had got that. Anybody preaching the mature side of Christianity must be signed to the cross and the dustbin of history. This is what monks do. And their danger is that they're actually